Have you ever heard the idea that recovery is the most important part of your workouts? Like, you can do what you want for your workouts, but when it comes to getting the results from your workouts, it's all about the recovery. Is this actually true? And if not, what might be more important than recovery itself? This is exactly what we're going to be exploring on today's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast. We're going to cue the intro song, and then we're going to dive right into this conversation. Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Charlie. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to let you know that we recently released a book called The Exercise for Life Method. And if you enjoy the conversations that we have every single week on this podcast, then you are going to love this book. So to pick up a free copy of this book, all you have to do is go to exerciseforlifemethod.com. Now, without further ado, let's dive into this week's episode. Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we're coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg, here in Schaumburg, Illinois, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset, and the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. Now, so many of you exercisers have taken the time out of your day to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, and we truly appreciate this. So much so that we want to read you a recent review that we received.
This 5-star review is titled Great Info, Consume Frequently. I love that title because it's giving you the dosage that you should be listening to this podcast. Anyways, it says, Charlie and Julie are fun, knowledgeable, motivating, and dedicated to creating healthy lifestyles for everyone. This podcast is an excellent resource for individuals of all fitness levels. Thank you so much for that 5-star review. We truly appreciate your feedback, and on this type of platform for this type of content, we thrive off of your feedback, our community, which is you, our listeners. So please take a minute and go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It'll take you less than a minute, and you never know, you might hear your review on the podcast next week.
So, Julie.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard this idea that recovery is the most important part of exercise?
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard it a lot as well, where it's like, okay, well, to me, it kind of almost gives the impression that you can do whatever you want for your workouts as long as you're recovering from them. And, as long as you're focusing enough on your recovery to make sure you can come back and do it again, then, you can do whatever you want for your workouts, because recovery is when you get the results from your workouts.
Right.
So here's the thing, though, is even though this soundbite is often thrown out, it actually is not a complete story. And it's not a complete story for a few different reasons, but one of which is that recovery is actually not the most important part of exercise. And this is something that we need to address, and we need to explain more thoroughly so you can understand what you actually need to be focusing on with your workouts, like during your workouts, and the role that recovery actually helps you play in order to get the results that you desire from your workouts. Because if we're just saying, okay, well, we're just focusing on recovery, like recovery is the most important part. Well, look, there's been people who have been recovering for 10, 20, 30 years from their last workout. It doesn't mean that they're getting better results from that, right? So the question is, okay, well, what actually matters here in terms of building your health and the role that exercise plays and the role that recovery plays, and which is actually more important?
Charlie, I think that the world where you came from, which was sports performance, was definitely a lot heavier in this recovery piece. Like, I see people like living the recovery lifestyle. It's like they go to the gym with their recovery tools, like their foam roller in their back pocket and like that beaded roller thingy. The stick. Yeah, exactly. Like the gel. They have all these appointments with things, the people that help them recover, like water massage chair thingy. Like they're living the recovery lifestyle. And I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing. I think that focusing on recovering from your workouts is great. But the problem is, as you highlighted, is the fact that it leads to this idea that what you do in your workout doesn't necessarily matter all that much as long as you're recovering from it, or thinking that I can work out however I want and if I just have the right recovery tools, then I'm hitting the nail on the head. And that's really not entirely true, because we've found that the more that you focus on how you're working out and what you're doing for your workouts will really dictate, number one, how much you actually have to recover from, and number two, the type of results you're going to get. So if you have worked out and maybe you feel like, geez, well, my workouts are leaving me feeling some type of way, and I must just not know the ways how to recover from them, and I must need to learn how to recover better. Well, this podcast is definitely going to be for you, because we're going to be talking about what might be more important than just the recovery that might lead you to not needing so much recovery.
Julia, I love that you brought up this term, the recovery lifestyle, because you're absolutely right. I was 100% living it, especially all through college and a little bit after college. I mean, just like you were saying, I was really focused on making sure I do my stretching after my workouts. And, I literally carried my stick around to all of my classes my senior year of college. So while I was sitting in class, and if I ever got bored, I would just start rolling out my legs to make sure I was recovering enough to be able to go and do my next workout later. I had my nutrition dialed in from like, okay, what's going to help me recover? Well, I had my specific shakes and make sure it's the right, carbs to protein ratio, and, do my foam rolling, and, everything like that was all about like, okay, I just thrashed my body in my workouts. Now I need to make sure that I can go and thrash it again later. So I need to do everything in my power to get, really focus on my recovery to make sure my body's ready for the next thrashing. Like that was more or less the strategy, right? Mm-hmm. But by the time I finished college, like my body was completely broken, meaning I had constant pain, constant tightness all throughout my body. Like outside looking in, you'd say, oh, that guy looks fit. It looks athletic. Like I could perform well and everything like that. But oh my gosh, my health was a wreck. And it wasn't a wreck because I was focusing so much on recovery. It was a wreck because I was giving my body so much that I needed to recover from. And that's really the big differentiator, right? Is like you can put all the time and effort and do all the things that you want to try to get as much recovery as you can. But if you're just thrashing your body day after day after day, well, that's a huge issue. So you can say, okay, recovery is the most important part, or we can say, well, actually, maybe we shouldn't give our bodies as much to recover from. And that is where we should be putting our focus. That's where we should be putting our time, effort, and attention. And then once we get that dialed in, guess what? The recovery, that just kind of happens on its own.
Absolutely. So if you go back a couple podcasts, we just talked about how damaging your muscles is actually damaging your health. So if you are loving this topic, go back and listen to that one too. But as we continue on this idea of how can we create your workouts to be less of an event that you have to recover from, I want to preface it by saying that we're not saying that you need to work out lightly. A lot of people feel like, oh, well, of course. Well, Julie and Charlie, they're not in the sports performance world. They're not in training Olympians and stuff. So they must think that you should just work out light, and not do intense workouts. So if you are a non-exerciser thinking about getting into exercise, this is still content for you. And if you are an aggressive exerciser wanting to get better results from your exercise, this content is still for you. I just want to preface that because I feel like when we start talking about ideas that we don't normally associate with certain categories of fitness people, then people start dismissing themselves. So this is actually a great conversation for all parties. Now, when we exercise, there is this idea of appropriateness that has to happen. And this word is almost never used in the fitness world. It's always like I did more, I PR'd, I pushed myself a little longer, or I did just enough, or I just did it, whatever. But what the word we want to start talking about today is going to be appropriateness. So what is appropriate for your body? Number one, that doesn't damage your body. And number two, that is enough stimulus to progress your body. And by saying enough, I'm not saying by like scratching the surface and doing the bare minimum, but what is significant so that it's creating results and not creating damage, not setting you back, but really pushing you forward towards your health goals through exercise.
Absolutely. You know, when we think about the consistency of exercise, consistency normally is thought of like how frequently you're exercising, but that's really only one part of it, and it's really not even the most important part. The most important part from a consistency standpoint is how consistently are you being appropriate with your exercise, meaning how often are you exercising in a way that builds your health without the negative side effects that we often associate with exercise, without being sore, without being achy, without feeling like we're tightening up or feeling like, you know, we had to damage our muscles or decrease our strength in order to recover and rebuild our strength. Okay. How often are you exercising in a way that you end your workout and you feel stronger, you feel more connected, you feel like you're able to move better after you work out than you did at the beginning? Not this, just the emotional high that a lot of people get when they work out, like, oh yeah, I feel like so much more with it and so much more happy now and everything like that. That's fine and well. We're talking about from a physical perspective. How often do you leave your workout and you're like, yeah, I feel stronger, not mentally stronger, but physically stronger. Like I could do more now than I could at the beginning of the workout. I can move better now than I could at the beginning of the workout. I can run faster now than I can at the end of the workout. Okay. And so those are ways of knowing that your workout's actually been appropriate for your body, that you're not getting this kind of this degradation to your health and function after you work out. Because here's the thing, the greater the hit to your system, the greater your strength decreases, the greater, you know, your motion decreases and everything like that with your workout, the more you have to recover from just to get back to your baseline. And what we're saying is you don't need to follow that model. You can exercise in a way that you don't get that decrease in strength, that you don't get that decrease in motion, that you don't get that decrease in energy immediately following your workout, but rather all of that stuff is increased. And so you don't have to spend the 48 hours or however long recovering, the 2 to 3 days until you feel ready to work out again. You can be ready to work out again and intensely and focus and everything like that the very next day. And you build your health from there. And then you can work out again the very next day and build your health and strength from there. And so that is what we are discussing today in terms of, well, how do we go about doing this? How do we go about making our exercise appropriate for our body? And then ultimately why this is actually more important than recovery, because it just leaves you with far less to have to recover from.
Yeah, Charlie, you brought up such a good point here with the consistency piece, and how when we say consistency in the fitness world, we think, oh yeah, well, I work out 4 days a week. That means consistent. Or I work out 5 days a week. That's consistent. But there are different applications of this word consistency. And what you had said was consistency of appropriately stimulating your muscles and your body. And so what this means is that you can repetitively, like meaning day after day, every day, you can go to the gym and stimulate your body, stimulate your muscles appropriately. And that is a great way to know, hey, I'm not damaging my body enough that I have to now take like this extreme recovery experience. So a lot of times we've been taught that, hey, when you go to the gym, you need to work out to the point that you can like feel it the next day, and then you recover, and then, you know, you can go back, I don't know, in a day or two, or you can go back the following day and just not work those areas that are sore and achy. We're saying you don't actually have to work yourself to the point of soreness and achiness. You do need to work yourself so that it's challenging, appropriately challenging, but you should always feel like you could go back and stimulate those muscles again the following day. And that's a great way to know, hey, I'm not working myself to the point of needing to adopt this recovery lifestyle. And I am working myself to the point where, hey, I'm challenging myself, but it's not too much to need recovery.
Absolutely. And so how do we go about doing this? Because this really was the big mindset shift for me and for many others of our exercisers that we work with. So how do we go about doing this, right? Because like before, when I would work out, it was all about, all right, get the most out of it was all about get the most out of this moment right now. Like squeeze as much out of my body as I can do right now, regardless of how long it takes me to recover, because, you know, the most I can do is clearly the best for me. But like I said, you know, that left my body broken. And what that meant is like actually being able to exercise long term, that wasn't going to be an option for me. So I need to figure out, okay, well, how do I go about changing this so I'm not feeling broken, so I'm not feeling achy, beat up, and sore with every single workout, and yet I'm still continuing to progress my strength and progress my function in everything that I wanted to do. And so, we've learned some really neat tips and tricks through some advanced courses, as well as a lot of experimentation on our own. And so there are a few things that we definitely recommend that you start implementing with your workouts. And one of the most important ones is going to be respecting your body's range of motion. Okay, how well does your body move? And not just like how well does it move, but how does your body move? I think that's a better way of thinking about it, because well gives some kind of comparison. We don't want to worry about a comparison. We're just thinking about like, how is my body moving today? Like, in what ways is my body able to move today? How much is my body able to move today? And just respecting that range of motion while you're doing your exercise. Don't try to go the full range of motion, the normative standard of, however deep you're going with a squat or however low you're going with a push-up or anything like that. You're just looking at, okay, well, how well and where do my shoulders move today? Where do my hips and knees move today? And then keeping that in mind and respecting that, staying within what your body can do the entire time you're exercising.
I think one of the biggest signs to know that we need to recover is when we feel sore and achy after a workout. And the best way to get sore and achy super fast is to disrespect your range of motion.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think it's because you've done too much weight. But what we've found is that most of the time it's not due to the weight, it's due to the range. And so because weight is really easy to see, it's like, oh, I did 5 pounds last time, now today I'm doing 10, and then I was sore. Dang, it must have been the weight. It's easy to see the weight changed. But what's really hard to see, especially for someone that is just a regular gym person and you haven't really been trained on this, is to see that your range of motion might have changed, because it's not clearly labeled, and unless you're looking for it, you're not really noticing it. So what this might look like is you might have changed your weight, but because of the changed weight, now you're having to move a little differently or faster or with a little bit of a more swing or jolting or lunging your body backwards or forwards or whatever. And this extra type of range of motion is usually what your body will respond negatively to. And you might be thinking, well, Julie, don't you think we need to train with full range of motion? Well, yes, I do. I think we need to train with full range of motion, but it needs to be your full range of motion, not the exercise's full range of motion, not the machine's range of motion, but we need to be checking your range of motion and respecting where your body wants to start and stop.
Yeah, I love that point. That's a really, really key concept that we need to keep in mind. And it leads us right in to the second tip that we have for you, is that when you're moving, not only do you want to make sure that you are respecting your range of motion, but one of the easiest ways to do that is to make sure you are moving slowly. Okay? Moving slowly will decrease the likelihood that you move too fast. You're like, okay, well, no duh. Well, why does that matter? If I'm moving slowly, obviously it's going to stop me from moving fast. Well, yeah, but here's the thing. When you move fast, that's when you are more likely to move too far. That's when we're more likely to use momentum to get our knees straighter, or to, bounce into the bottom of a squat and bounce up, or to, drop down farther into a push-up, or, doing the things that ultimately leave our bodies feeling achy, feeling beat up, feeling sore, feeling like we have more stuff to recover from. So when you respect your range of motion and you move really slowly within that range of motion, guess what? After you finish working out, you actually feel more connected to your body. You actually feel stronger. You actually feel like, okay, yeah, I don't have that much to recover from. You wake up the next day and you're like, okay, yeah, I could go back and I could do that thing again. So moving slowly goes right in line with respecting your range of motion. In fact, it's one of the primary ways to go about making sure that you are respecting your range of motion.
Yeah, moving slowly is the first tip that I give my clients, and what we implement right away, because as I said before, the first tip was respecting your range of motion. That takes a little bit of schooling. That takes a little bit of, okay, I need to listen to a few of these podcasts from Julie and Charlie. I need to look at my range of motion, really figure it out. But moving slowly is so easy to do. I mean, however fast you move, then go slower. It's super easy. And there's so many benefits to it. Number one, you're less likely to go past your range of motion, even if you're not really quite sure where the start and stop of your range of motion is. Maybe you're just getting used to checking your range of motion. And also, it allows you to really listen to your body. And, one thing that I think we lose sight of when we work out is that the discomforts of workouts are always good, and it's not always good. Sometimes things pop up that we're supposed to acknowledge and stop an exercise for or continue an exercise for, and we never feel them until 5 reps later because we're moving so darn fast. So move a bit slower, be the slowest person in the gym, move slow for the whole range. Like Charlie gave some really good examples, and you probably didn't realize it, but all the examples he gave were at the end of the range, like the bottom of the squat, the top of the knee extension. And usually when our body's running out of range is when our brain is like, well, hurry up, go quickly because it's hard right here. And then we kind of kick the weight or thrust the weight a little bit faster. So move slowly and move slowly through your full range. And wherever your body stops, just stop. That's it.
Now, if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, okay, well, how slow is slow? I don't want you to put a number to it, okay? In fact, what I want you to do is the third tip that we have for you, which is to focus on squeezing your muscles. Because here's the thing. When you focus on squeezing your muscles while you're doing the exercise, you don't have an option other than moving slow. And one of my clients said this so beautifully. It's just like, oh my gosh, when I just focus on squeezing my muscles, there's no other way that I can move except for slow. And it's true because you're no longer focused on doing the motion. When you just focus on squeezing your muscles, you are going to, as a result, end up moving much slower. And not only that, but you'll be able to feel where your body wants to stop moving. And so you'll be able to respect your range of motion much more accurately as well. And so this third tip really helps you not only identify how slow is slow, but also identify like where your range of motion actually is, just simply by focusing on squeezing the muscles that you're trying to work while you're doing the exercise.
When you focus on squeezing your muscles, it takes a lot of stuff out. And it actually, as much as like that seems like such a simple tip, it's actually kind of technical, more because the skill is difficult. I have trained people that has taken them like in a whole year just to like really feel a muscle squeeze because they're just haven't practiced it enough. They've never done it in their life. They feel kind of disconnected from their bodies. So really continuing to practice this skill of squeezing your muscles, connecting with your muscles. And a lot of times it goes like this. You do like 20 bicep curls and then eventually you start feeling your biceps burn. And so that means you feel like you are squeezing your muscles. We actually recommend that you do it kind of opposite of that, meaning you try to actually activate and connect mentally to your muscle or your bicep and use your bicep to complete the bicep curls instead of doing all these bicep curls and at the end somehow feeling your bicep. So reverse action that. Try to really make the first step squeezing your muscles rather than the results and see where that takes you because you're going to notice you have to move a lot slower. You're going to notice that your body will stop even if you think you should have more range. Wherever your body stops, just stop. And the more you'll actually feel connected to your body and you'll actually be getting more results because your muscles actually have to contract more the more you ask them to contract.
Now, if you enjoyed this conversation today, what we talked about in terms of like how to make exercise more appropriate for your body, then you are going to love the training that we put together called How to Rebuild Your Aching Body in as little as 6 weeks without changing your lifestyle. And so all you have to do to get registered for this free training is go to secrets.exerciseforlifemethod.com. There's another one starting soon, so head there now, secrets.exerciseforlifemethod.com, and get registered. There's no cost to attend, but space is limited, so make sure to head there ASAP and get signed up. Again, it's secrets.exerciseforlifemethod.com. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that is hesitant to exercise because of how much time they feel like it takes their body to recover after every workout? Share this episode with them so they can learn not only what might be more important than recovery from their workouts, but actually how to go about structuring their workouts so they have less to recover from. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find this episode when they're looking for information on exercise and when they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us a 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week. We'll talk with you all next week. So how'd you like that episode? Did you find the information useful? If you enjoyed what we discussed today, then you are going to love the Exercise for Life Method, which is a book that we just put out and you can get a free copy of by going to exerciseforlifemethod.com. All we ask is that you pay for shipping and handling, so head there now and get your free copy, as well as some exclusive bonuses that you will get instant access to when you get the book. You can learn more and get your copy at exerciseforlifemethod.com. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.